Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another all new X's for Show Live, your favorite comic podcast for modern Marvels, Cronus Gaming Classics, and more. I'm Nico, and you can check me out on Twitter and Instagram at Nico Action. That's NicoAction. And I am so excited to be here. Oh, wait.
You're on mute.
I'm going to bring you out. You're back. I've used the magic of Limbo to restore your voice.
You're
singing
so
to my
powerful.
shell, singing to my shell mermaid.
I am the fully restored TK, and you can find me on all the socials at xnateXgrayX.
Hey everybody, it's Nathan, and I'm trying to step into the role as a Limbo goddess. You can find me on all the socials at Dazzler AOA, mainly Twitter, but I'm on all the other ones. So.
And we are here to knock out the rest of some dark webbing. This is the most excited I've been to finish a crossover in a while, not like in a negative way. Like, I wanted my answers, I wanted my conclusions, and I'm really excited to get into it. I just want to, I think we could have cut a good 140 pages, but it's no specific 140 pages. I kind of wish you could choose your own adventure 140 pages away, but that's really what we're here to talk about. General first impressions. I mean, I'm positive with edits. How about you guys?
I gotta say, the ending was great. I think the event was maybe too big for what it did. But I do love what it did to some of the characters, especially Maddie.
I agree with both of you. I think, as I mentioned to Nico, I'm sort of excited / intrigued by what this might mean for crossovers going forward. This was a unique one for Marvel, given what we get these days. And there are things I like about that. There are things I don't. Nico, I love that you went with page count and not issue count. 140 pages, few here, few there, maybe the same number of issues. Who knows how it would go? I do think there were maybe some books or some issues that felt out of place or less necessary. It's tough to say exactly what it was, but I also really like that, a book like Venom, which didn't have to be a part of this, intersected with this event in a way that might have gotten people on board with Venom. I don't know. There's something going on there. And I just think it's very interesting that this was not a summer blockbuster. This was not a nothing will ever be the same. This was like a weird Christmas break for a bunch of people in the Marvel universe. And I think given how important we have to make crossovers lately, I thought it was really interesting just to have kind of a weird Christmas break for the crossover.
I get that. I actually kind of, now that you've reconceptualized that, I'm like, okay, cool. I get that.
Yeah, we're just kind of going to have to see.
I am so stoked to bring in some voices we're all big fans of here, because, it's just been so exciting that everyone has not agreed on all of the same things about this crossover. So we have some voices that felt differently than some of other voices, and that's what makes this show work. So I'm super excited to bring Steve and Jonah to the show and to start talking about some amazing Spider-Man goodness. I'm going to pass the mic over to Nathan, but I do believe we've got some introductions to do first.
Yeah, first let's introduce yourselves.
Hey everyone, it's Jonah. You can follow me over on Twitter and Instagram at PeakJonah. That's Peak.
Hello, it's me, Howdy Steve Person, and I have it all backwards. You can find me on Twitter at HowdyDuda. That's HOWDYDUDA.
And I'm so glad y'all are here, because we are here to talk about the Amazing Spider-Man, which is so strange for X's for Show, right? Like, we're like, Spider-Man, what? But I know both of y'all are really into Spider-Man. Nico too. I gotta say, Steve, I know, has gotten me into reading this Spider-Man run. But I was like, oh, it's Seb Wells. but it's Peter Parker, but it's Zeb Wells. And I was like, oh, okay, it's good. So,
Oh, I'm a spider reader now. I'm dropping X-Men and picking up Venom.
all right, so as we are thrust into the story, we have Peter Parker in his own version of hell, but it's Limbo, but it's hell because Ben Reilly thinks it's hell. And, where are we with the hell that Ben Reilly has created for Peter Parker?
I love it. Oh, sorry, Jonah, do you want to go first?
Oh no, I think Nico was talking.
Oh,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nico.
I think I'm going to just echo what TK said. I like this hell, but there's something that feels almost uneventy about it. Like, this feels like it deserved a little bit more attention or a little bit less something. But I was like looking over how long this stretched out for Amazing Spider-Man and how many issues has kind of been like, it's the X-Men happening. And I feel like this hell for, Peter Parker is just, I don't know. It just didn't feel as big as I wanted. I liked it, but there could have been a bigger something, just a little more oomph.
Well, I guess what I sort of wonder, and I want to ask our current resident Amazing Spider-Man expert in Steve, and then our big what's going on at Marvel Theories guy in Nico, was this, do you think, an attempt to highlight to use a really great Spider-Man run to get people into X-Men stuff? Or was this an attempt to get people who were not reading what is a really good Spider-Man run to read it through using a crossover with the X-Men? Because there seems to be something happening here in which this is an attempt to get somebody who's not reading something to be reading that thing.
That's an interesting question that I'd like to start by saying I've been saying it since the beginning of this crossover, and honestly before it started, but I have felt for a long time that this was the most organic Marvel event in a really long time. I am notably not an event at Marvel liker. I don't generally appreciate them. Occasionally one knocks it out of the park. One that did was 1989's Inferno, or whichever year it actually came out. And that's a big part of the
It
reason
lasted so long.
We'll get into why I love this one so much, but a lot of it is because of the spirit of that Inferno rages on. But part of what's so good about this particular event for me is that it grows organically out of plots that have been simmering in both Amazing Spider-Man and X-Men titles for the last 3 to 4 years. It's just stuff that was worked on in the background quietly in both books. And then once Zeb Wells, who worked on Hellions and worked in, the subject of Maddie, the subject of clone rights, the subject of identity so much, moved over to Amazing Spider-Man, it only made sense to finally bring those two titles together now that somebody was working on it from both ends. That's my feeling about it. Personally, I think that if you read this event and it helped you get into Amazing Spider-Man, it is the best run of Amazing Spider-Man I have read since the original. And I have not read all of them, so please do not take my word as the word of God. But out of the ones I have read, this has been a phenomenal run that I think is criminally underrated. I don't know how people in comic book stores compare to people on Twitter or online, but it seems like a lot of people have not been giving this run the chance it desperately deserves. Now, if you're a Spider-Man reader and this was what got you into X-Men, I'm personally sorry for you, because I am on record as a person who has not particularly enjoyed Jerry Duggan's run on X-Men. The Dark Web X-Men tie-in has been my least favorite part, and I have personally seen how it has generally turned a lot of X-Men readers off of this event just by reading that tie-in. I think it finished really strong. Personally, I really like Dark Web X-Men after how it finished. I hope that it works both ways around, but I think if this event functions in any direction, it functions to get X-Men readers to look into Spider-Man.
And I think we're at a point where Marvel really needs corporate synergy. They're about to try and do something even bigger than Endgame, and there really is a design element. They said, Zeb Wells, you wrote Amazing Spider-Man for Brand New Day. Come back, write more. And, the danger is like with a property like Amazing Spider-Man, where Dan Slott was on for so long, Dan Slott became synonymous with a lot of the things that I think were certainly Dan Slott's ideas, many of them, but also a lot of these writers are sort of corporately invoked to do things. And, you know, when Zeb Wells was one of the writers to write Brand New Day with Dan Slott, you know, they debuted at the same time, and Dan Slott stayed on the book. Zeb Wells kind of went away. There was a sort of like his run never really got a chance to start because it was one of 4 writers writing at the same time. And his New Mutants kind of felt the same way in a lot of ways, his early New Mutants run before he came back and did Hellions. So it was somebody who had a lot of history with both of these properties coming in and working a little bit on both properties at a time where Marvel's peak interest right now is reuniting the brands in a clear way. And I'm fascinated by how that's pivoted the story, because I do think it grows organically out of a number of stories running in the background. I totally agree. I wish I liked the way they came together more. Like the strands are cool, but I maybe don't appreciate the rope. But I think the design is always to get people to buy more. There's an idea in corporate comics that is you need to get everybody to believe that they are personally responsible for carrying the weight of the line on their backs, such that they become integrated into the experience. And that's part of why there's such a focus on stay with the LCS from like corporate culture, because being in the store, you pick up more, you hear advice on what to buy. Buying digitally, you sort of look for what you want, you sign off, right? And so I think this is a part of a bigger picture. Oh, what a good chance to facilitate good storytelling of organic stories that grew naturally, and what a good opportunity to do something that is better for the brands as a whole.
If you were a betting man, would you guess that X people bought Spider-Man or Spider-Man people bought X?
I think this was a wash. I don't think the numbers have really bore out a whole lot of change. I think fans just fanned.
But
If I may, sorry.
Go ahead.
It's a super weird choice not to have series artist and legend in the industry, John Romita Jr., do the Spider-Man parts, because he is one of the most beloved former X-Men artists. It feels like a slam dunk that was weirdly avoided. I know a lot of people have controversial opinions about whether or not John Romita Jr. is still the top of the game. I completely disagree with those people. He's a fucking
His
legend.
Amazing Spider-Man is legendary.
Yeah,
he did the
Amazing
JMS.
Spider-Man
He'll never
has
have
always
to
been-
prove himself.
Yeah, and his X-Men run is one of my very favorites. So it's a little weird that he didn't get put on for this bid, but I think all the artists did great. I'm sorry, Nathan. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead. I was going to say, here's one thing you have to remember about Spider-Man and X-Men. There's a long history of the two starting back in the 60s, sort of coexisting in the same sort of space, right? The Avengers are the heroes, and the Fantastic Four are the heroes that everybody can look up to and loves, and they forget that Wanda and Pietro are mutants when they were mutants, and they kind of overlook that. But Spider-Man's always been feared and hated, just like the X-Men have. So I think there was a lot of synergy between their core story ideas and concepts from them in the past. And this more seems like maybe not an attempt to get anybody to pick up the book who doesn't pick up the book, but it seems like more an attempt to get, like Nico was saying, some of that corporate synergy back into the brands, where they are both characters who are both characters or teams that are, you know, feared by the masses of humanity. And they have these strong enemies that are just normal humans, like J. Jonah Jameson, longtime adversary of Spider-Man. Now it's different now. Thankfully, there's been growth on that part there. But then you also have, you know, like the Trasks and the Purifiers.
Moira now.
And now Moira, she was the greatest human ally. Now she's the X-Mutant. Now she went to X-Mutant camp, and she's like, mutants are
She
bad.
pulled an Ahab.
Yeah, she's an ex-mutant now. She's teaching other people not to be mutants.
She is. But yeah, so it's great to see them try to pull that corporate synergy back in with the brands on it, and hopefully that can, when X-Men finally debut in the MCU, hopefully that can lead to some cool movie crossovers or something like that.
I'll say it was weird that it wasn't, for instance, Wolverine. Like, what's the last big crossover we really saw with them? You know, Spider-Man being a part of the X-Men at Logan's insistence.
He's too busy wondering why he's in Midnight Suns.
They just did a
and
Spider-Man crossover right before Dark Web is the problem.
Yeah.
Yep. The Hellfire Gala issue for Spider-Man obviously heavily featured Wolverine in the successful attempt to rescue Mary Jane from Orcus and Evil Moira. Like one of the things that I personally love about this event is the Limbo demons that are torturing Peter Parker, the Sinister Six ones, and my personal favorite, and I know I've seen TK talk about it, I know Steve, they love him as well, but Rec Rap, like, tell me, like, where were you all at when you first read these issues with Rec Rap and the other Limbo demons and the Sinister Six knockoffs themselves? I think I fell head over heels in love with Rec Rap because like he's like the best Limbo demon boy ever. And I gotta know where y'all stand.
Gonna make a weird comparison. This hell was maybe a little too fun for me. It seemed like I would have a really nice time and it was really enjoyable. Whereas to a different crossover or a different event that happened in Darkhold, we kind of got a glimpse into what Peter Parker's actual personnel would be like, which is keeping the entire world together and stretching himself so thin, literally and figuratively, that everybody's falling apart around him and there's nothing he can really do besides just webbing people. And,
so his regular life then.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a little too Rena this hell. It's a little too like well polished and produced.
Yeah, this is a little more fun, a little more like actually like, oh, it would be fun just to go into work and then just do the opposite of what you're expected to do. No, I don't want to say harass anybody, but it's kind of what it is. It's kind of just like every day is opposite day. You just got to be loud. It seems like a little too much fun, a little too enjoyable. Rec Rap really made me happy because he's essentially being the Peter Parker metaphor. Nobody died, but he just wants to be Peter Man, Spider Peter Man, and that's just who he wants to be. And he got finger guns. I mean, what more can you love about this dork? He's a dork. He's just an absolute dork. And then he says it's wall climbing time. Like everything about it is so wrong that it becomes right.
Dream Pain sub.
Rec Rap is the sensational character find of 2023, and it's crazy because it's so early into this year. But we've already found our Taya. It's insane. Like Parker Pete Man, the whole change from like getting the mystical bits of Venom Clintar to turning it into a Spider-Man suit that eats him, having everything backwards.
Oh, I think we have a temporary freeze for a moment. I'm gonna.
Until it comes back, I'll take over on my opinion.
Yes, please do.
But I've got the floor open for when we get him back. You know, I think I'm going to say a lot of the same stuff. As I really feel similarly. Like, what a cool.
Did I lose
fun...
you for a second there?
Oh yeah, now you're back.
Sorry, I was just saying that it's so dumb, it's brilliant. It's absolutely phenomenal. I love his web wanging. I love his like weird catchphrases. I love his crawl walling. He has everything backwards, and I just want to say, as much as I love Rec Rap, as much as he's a great character, I really want to shout out Joe Caramagna for the lettering in these issues, because his web wanging wouldn't be anything without all these amazing sound effects and speech bubbles. He really knocked it out of the park on these two issues, especially 18.
I think one of the big things this crossover had to do, if it wasn't doing a lot of the stuff that we discussed, is to maybe sort of shift our thinking about Limbo. I think we really kind of did see it as a hell stand-in for a lot of its time. And I think we now have to look at it a little differently, and kind of what they have always said, which is that it's not hell and it's not necessarily a bad place. It is a different place, and it is very messy. And I think, what we got in the original Inferno and what we get from interesting writers who want to play around with Inferno is that it is a place of heightened and distorted ideas. And for a character like Peter, who is all pain and all comedy, you do get this kind of depiction of a world that is horrible, but also funny. And like maybe you can pull something great out of the funny. And, you know, Rekrap as like a demon, as somebody who is supposed to be part of the torture, but just ends up kind of wanting to be Peter, is really like amusing, but also like, you know, just to spoil the entire end of the series, and we'll get into the end of the series at the end of this, but like Limbo is now kind of like Krakoa. It is a nation withstanding in the world. And I think for that to be the case, it couldn't just be hell. And so what we got with the Insidious Six, with Rekrap, with all of the like funniness to come out of it, is that it's not so much horrible as it is Funhouse mirror distorted in a way that if we can look at it and not see it as meant to torture us, but maybe just see it as weird and get to interact with it in that way, it could start to be like really fun. And I think
so like saying Sexy Bizarro.
Sexy Bizarro, exactly. You nailed it.
Sexy Bizarro.
Rekrap is the best example of it.
Sexy Bizarro, which honestly reminds me only of the Insidious Six in this issue, because I could figure out the names for each of them, but I was having a hard time figuring out the provenance of Lazaro, other than that it's Bizarro Lizard, because he's red. Like all the other ones make sense. Dr. Octopus.
Missed opportunity that it's not a Bizarro Lizzo.
Yeah, it's Bizarro Lizzo, that's for sure.
Limbo hurt.
She's feeling scary as hell. It would be
oh, come on.
No, hella scary because it's all got to be mixed up.
But I love the thing you're bringing up, because I think my big suspension here was, oh no, Hallows' Eve bum rushed Maddie. Like it's just like it's kind of got to be a fun house, because there were so many things that happened where I was like, okay, it's panel magic, but like it's panel magic, so it's kind of okay that it's silly here. If it happened in a hyper serious comic, I'd be like, I cannot accept Rekrap.
Judgment Day
I reject him.
this.
Yeah,
if Rekrap and Judgment Day would be awful.
If Rekrap was the Celestial,
I would have actually loved that. I would have loved that even more.
That would have made Judgment Day judgment proof. You could not come for Judgment Day. Judgment Day is gorgeous. It's a model. It looks like Linda Evangelista. So,
I think I have to slightly disagree. I think there's a lot of the non-serious tones work well in a idea of like there are high stakes, but Hallows' Eve playing Majora's Mask and putting a mask on, changing her body, and then just pushing Maddie off the side of the castle was that might have been a little too far for my taste of. Maybe this could have been just a drop more serious to make it feel like, okay, we have to remember this is meant to be serious. The stakes are meant to be high. This is meant to be dangerous. That felt a little too slapstick for my taste of what we should be getting out of the danger element.
And what I was looking for, Jonah, in that moment is, are we pushing into a place of like dream logic that is being applied to everybody, and maybe even starting to frustrate the characters because the most powerful person is not necessarily able to behave in that way? And I think the book editorially really missed an opportunity to codify its own rules and make those a part of the crossover and make those a part of why everything mattered. So ultimately, I do have to agree with you. It doesn't really justify itself in terms of why Hallows' Eve would be able to do that and why we should believe it. But I think they had all the tools there to do so. And I think if they had put the work in, what we would have had is a very and also a fuller concept of Limbo to carry out of all this. Limbo is the place that you go where the playing field is not level. It's just really different than the playing field we're used to on Earth as we know it. So you have to be prepared for the fact that when Limbo comes into play, nobody is necessarily as powerful as they ought to be. And that's going to be important for a variety of reasons.
Yeah. as we're wrapping up our coverage of Amazing Spider-Man 17 and 18, are there any final thoughts that any of y'all have for the main driver for this Dark Web event? I mean, we had the alpha and the finale, but Spider-Man really has been the main driver for Dark Web as an event. It sort of carried the stick, so to speak. Like a lot of Marvel crossovers recently, some of the side books had really important pieces, like Dark Web X-Men had really important pieces, but they all tied back into Amazing Spider-Man to end with the Dark Web finale. What are your final thoughts? I'm going to say, for me, I just have to say it's really nice to see a fan of X-Men and a fan of Spider-Man in Zeb Wells and his love of Maddie Pryor kind of like bridge the story over in a fun throwback to this event that we all love in Inferno. And really, people were really afraid of the outcome and what he was going to do to Maddie in it. But I think he really actually continued upon Vita Ayala's story and what they were doing and really took her to the next level. And she was able to grow in a character. And I hope that this is going to be a step forward for her character. And we're not going to see this level of slide back. Now, she is the queen of Limbo. So, like, doesn't mean she has to be nice and like a superhero. But,
she's like Ambassadrix.
Right. She is like, imagine like Deanna Troy in the Mirror Universe. That's exactly what she would be. Yeah.
Hot.
So, what are y'all's final thoughts on Amazing Spider-Man?
I love a lot of the art. I am so fucking gay for anything Ed McGuinness wants to draw. Ed McGuinness has been designing men who beautifully deform physicality in really sexy ways for a really long time. There's a complexity to the density he fills a panel with and a way that he finds a natural undulation in facial work such that he can apply his hypermusculature of physicality to a person in clear ways, so that even though it's this hypermuscular, performatively gorgeous J. Jonah Jameson, he's still J. Jonah Jameson because Ed McGuinness knows how to capture the essence of a person. And that's just something that's like masterwork shit right there.
My last thought is like, this was really great. And we got some cool stuff for the Spider Corner of the Marvel Universe out of it. But I am interested to go back to what Amazing Spider-Man was doing outside of this. And to see if anything gets carried from this into that run and into Peter resolving what has been a very complicated period in his life.
Spoilers, it will. Read Mary Jane and Black Cat.
Jonah, Steve.
For me, my last thoughts. I really enjoyed a lot of where the humor from this book was really able to excel and shine, and gave us this new champion in early February for best character of 2023 already. But I do think getting to the end of King Chasm, which I actually do really love the design, and I love the him wielding the staff. He kind of, not that I don't think this is the intention, but he kind of looks like Spawn.
That's kind of a big Spawn spiders. They just gonna look like each other forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and a little Grendel.
Oh yes,
Mm-hmm.
a lot. I know a lot of character designs. We're very well into the lifespan of comics. A lot of character designs are going to bleed into one another, and it's just got to be okay. So I really enjoyed it, but I think getting there could have been a little bit cleaner. It felt a little muddy. Well, we have to figure out a way to actually get to the point of, Maddie helping everybody, but she can't be in power if she's helping everybody. It feels like we could have found a better way to get there without tracking so much mud and not be so muddled together.
As for my final thoughts, I want to throw a few things at the wall and just see if they stick. As to Nico's thought about Ed McGuinness's art in this series, I think it's fantastic. I think it's a worthy successor to John Romita Jr.'s art style in this respect. It is very boxy. It is extremely stylized. It is appealing to me and to seemingly everybody. Fantastic work. I think J. Jonah Jameson saying, "Bring me tasty pics of Spider-Man while crying his eyes out in the most desperate situation of his life is a miracle of comic books. It's a miracle of sequential art. I'm fucking happy that I got to see it, and I'll remember it always. I'm not one to gloat, but I feel very vindicated about Maddie, and that's all I'll say about that. And on top of everything else, I think that this final issue left me with just the most feelings of heartbreak, rejection, and betrayal from Ben Reilly's perspective, because after all is said and done, after meeting another nowhere person in a nothing place, Ben Reilly once again didn't matter to somebody else. Once again, somebody else got what they wanted and then forgot about him and his needs and his wants, and he just got left by the roadside. And as wrong as he is in this series, it's hard not to sympathize with this character who doesn't know any better. It's rough. It's rough chuckles, my friends.
Yeah, especially after what he went through and beyond. Like,
Woof.
yeah.
Not the psychoreactive goo.
Well, I believe from 2 issues about the titular, amazing, spectacular, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man himself to 2 dudes who sometimes try to kill him, but also sometimes get their own books, we're going to be talking a bit about Venom, Gold Goblin, and the complex narrative that Marvel was hoping to tell with this major event. Now, I am pretty positive on these issues. Gold Goblin by Christopher Cantwell, Lan Medina, Scott Hanna, Wayne Foucher, Antonio Fabella, Andrew Crossley, Dee Cunniffe, Pete Pantazis, and Joe Sabino, with Venom featuring writing by Ram V, Al Ewing, Brian Hitch, Andrew Curry, Scott Hanna. At some point, I switched over to the art because Brian Hitch and Andrew Curry and Scott Hanna did not also write this. Colors by Alex Sinclair and letters by Clayton Cowles. These were good issues. I maybe thought Venom lacked substance enough for 2 issues. I would have been much happier with 1 issue telling all of this, but I thought that these were good issues that didn't belong in Dark Web for both their sake and Dark Web's sake. They're good, but they didn't add anything to this, and I think that sometimes detracts from people being willing to pick up an issue of a miniseries or an ongoing, oh, it's a crossover issue, oh, it's a tie-in issue. We are not that far out from the writer of Venom not writing the tie-in issues of Venom for other crossovers. That was just 3 years ago that the title of Venom saw crossover issues as like not part of the story. So I think for me, I really liked these issues, but I just didn't feel they fit here. How did everybody feel about the sense of very full story packedness, even if it wasn't overflowing for everybody? There's the very fullness of this being slotted into Dark Web.
I might have only given Gold Goblin 1 at most if I was going to do it. And, you know, that was the thing I said immediately when we started this series is it's issue number 1 and then 2 issues of a crossover and then 2 more issues of whatever it is, which I just think is rough on the character of Gold Goblin and this huge idea that Norman has had his sins eaten and is, you know, remorseful, if not a good guy. I mean, it's so tough to know what he is. But
are they remorsals?
We need to turn sin eating into a whole product line. So, you know, it's unfortunate because it is very complicated and it's Spider-Man's biggest enemy. I don't even want to know where you're going with this. I'm going to keep talking.
Talk over me.
It's tough that 2 of his 5 issues are dedicated to this in a way that also is very kind of confusing. Again, it's that dream logic thing, but then it's also not, where they're like, we're having this kid's birthday party and he has no friends, so I had to like pay people to come to his birthday party, which we had to do because if you canceled every birthday party that happened because of hell crossing over with the world, you'd never have any birthday parties, which kind of makes sense. But again,
I'm from New Jersey. That's the case here.
There it is.
TK,
You know,
if I
it
could,
makes me want.
I think he had to pay people to come because he's Norman
What's
Osborn.
What's that?
I think he had to pay people to come because he's Norman Osborn.
Oh yeah, no, I
That's
know.
part of
It's
it.
just the fact that they had to bring that up. There's just something that's so like it feels like there's dream logic happening in the way that it feels like Hallows Eve being able to overtake Maddie is dream logic. And I want this all kind of brought to some kind of head, and it never really is. The Gold Goblin issues are so about Norman, and they can't really balance with the crossover. Similarly, Venom just has so much going on in his completely divorced from Dark Web world. It was cool to see some overlap, but it's a little too complicated to have 3 issues that have so much integral stuff from both weaving into them. It was very complicated. Not all bad, just very complicated, and I think a lot will unfortunately get missed as a result.
I think Al Ewing is so used to his runs being cut into by crossovers, like Sword. Like, how many crossovers did Sword run into? And like, I think he's like, no, I'm going to tell the story I want to, and you are gonna read the Dark Web associated stuff and read my story too, and hopefully you like my story too. And I get it. It is very dense. It made me want to read more of it because I found the normal Venom story a little bit more compelling than maybe the Dark Web piece of it. I did like, it was fun to see Kamala have to be the elder hero and the grandma to like Normie and Dylan, but like besides that, like, okay, cool. Did it really do much to the Dark Web story? No, it was good. It was fun. I think Gold Goblin, especially number 3, really divorced itself from the Dark Web event more than anything else. It was a great issue. It's a great story. To brand it as part of the Dark Web event really seemed sort of misleading. I didn't love the cover too, because I'm like, oh, there's going to be more Queen Goblin, and no, I was like, oh, Queen Goblin. Oh, no. But they were fine issues.
And I love that they're even like, let's make Dark Web really tiny in the upper left. Let's like hide this Dark Web so you don't notice. Shit's Dark Web.
Yeah, let's hide the Dark Web, but not notice that the entire background is in front of a glowing ectoplasm web itself.
I mean, that's a bright web. That's like bright green with white. That doesn't look like a Dark Web to me, Jonah.
You're not wrong. I'm not going to disagree with you on that.
Talk to me, Jonah. How did you feel about the venomosity, the Gold Goblin-idity, the save me?
I think I have to agree with the sentiment. These are good issues that kind of stand alone, that have the unfortunate necessity to be part of a crossover where they don't really feel like telling the story of the crossover, nor do they really feel like engaging with the elements of the crossover. They're kind of just doing their own thing, and that's a little bit weird to me, because I think that if you want to have the titles in the crossover, I would think it'd be better to have those characters interact fully with what's going on and having repercussions or elements. Gold Goblin, I think, is a little bit more of the offender, even if I have been enjoying reading Gold Goblin, which I have been. I've been very much enjoying reading this Norman story, but it is a little, this issue highlights that, oh, we didn't really want to talk about the event at all. Like, we're just not going to talk about it, really, outside of a couple of fringe, sentences. Venom, on the other hand, I think, for me, did a little bit of a better job of trying to tie in Dark Web, but I don't know if I really like Kamala being here. As much as I enjoyed what she brought, it feels a little bit forced, in my opinion, to get her back into the tie-in. It just feels weird when she's already being featured in her, her own title. It does feel a little bit out of place. Yeah.
Look, he found her. He did it.
It felt a little out of place for me, and especially the ending was like, oh yeah, Deus Ex Machina, we have to bring Venom back into this somehow, and she's gonna whisk him away. It felt a little, because we have to do a tie-in, and because this is part of a larger crossover event, we have to figure out a way to get back there, and I feel it wasn't the most creative way to get everybody back towards the finale of Dark Web. I think there were better ways that the storytellers could have really utilized what these characters represent in terms of, and the new environment of Dark Web, that I think really would have brought these books into a better position of saying these are good issues that are also good within this crossover.
So, where to start? I'll start with Gold Goblin because I think that's the easiest to talk about. Gold Goblin is a series that I'm really loving. Is maybe one of my favorite series I've read in a long time. Len Medina knocking it out of the park every single issue, like really going hard with the gore and the traumatic dream sequences. It's a really good exploration of Norman Osborn's psyche, and I particularly love how this issue gets deep into the dirt of, like, Norman Osborn wants to expunge his sins. What does that mean when it's not just his personal sins, but the sins of people who looked up to him, and the legacy of the Green Goblin, and how that echoes down throughout history to people like Owen Ward? That's all really interesting. However, none of this had to be a Dark Web series. I really thought that it came about at this time because Dark Web was happening, but honestly, it came about at this time because Norman was forced by the events of the Hobgoblin War just prior to Dark Web to start being a superhero, and it happened to coincide with Dark Web. So it has to kind of, like, Norman is facing his demons. I can see the connective tissue here in like a symbolic sort of way, but he really doesn't have anything to do with it beyond yelling at a Spider-Man impersonator that you need to be out there fucking right now, young man. He talks to him like he's his dad. It's really frustrating. Really good issues, does not tie in a what I think is a satisfying way, but I think it has a lot of metatextual similarity, which I can see why they tied it in, but I think it's really just a lot of contemporaneous stuff happening. When it comes to Venom, my colleagues, all of you here for the listeners, my colleagues have previously mentioned that Al Ewing writes this series, and they all know this, but I want to specifically shout out that Ram V wrote issue 15 of the series during Dark Web, and he is as much of a part of this. As X-Men readers, we're all a lot more used to talking about Al Ewing and what Al Ewing does with crossovers. And I think it's important to note that Al Ewing is somebody who, at this point, is really well known for his ability to work in the events of a crossover into whatever story he's been working with and make that flow. Ram V, I think, does just about the same amount of good work making this story actually tie in with what Dylan is going through to Dark Web. However, I think this works better for the series than it does for the event, which may be a controversial opinion for me to have, because I know a lot of us want this event to work. I want this event to work. I really like this event. I think Venom is the least interesting and the least important part of this event to the event itself. But on the flip side of that, as a person reading the Venom comic and as a person who was reading the Sword comic and other comics by Al Ewing at the time that he invested in crossovers, and I haven't read a lot of Ram V crossovers, but I'm sure they'll be great when I get around to them. As somebody who's been invested in all that, I personally am so grateful that this series does more for the Venom comic than it does for Dark Web. I love that it did not get too sidetracked. Now, I do think that the Venom story is unfortunately smashed at this point. It's train wrecked by Dark Web to the point where it had to spend about 3 to 4 issues getting across stuff that would have happened in one issue of the regular series. That's the usual amount of information and puzzle we are doled out in a Venom series has been doled out across pretty much the entirety of Dark Web. And that's an unfortunate slowdown. It really is. As it ties into the series, I think it really suffers from that last issue where Venom gets pulled into the final confrontation in Dark Web finale by Maddie. Terribly named final issue, by the way. And then, unfortunately, in that issue, which you all will talk about without me later, Venom plays almost no part in that as Bedlam or as Codex or Venom. It's a real shame that there is a complete disconnect between the end of the Venom Dark Web tie-ins and the actual finale of Dark Web. It doesn't seem like anything happens there. It doesn't seem like there's any reason for Venom to suddenly leave the end of this issue as we close on 16 right here.
And I think
that being said,
I think part of it is that by putting Dark Web on the book, though, now I don't trust the branding. So, like, if I would buy Venom, because it's a Dark Web tie-in, and I get stuff that feels completely unrelated from Dark Web. Like one of the things that we learned from the Ariana Mar interview a billion years ago was Sword didn't get stuck in crossovers. Instead, Al Ewing said, I want to do a book that fits all of these crossovers, and designed it that way. And that was the point of Sword.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things there was that, like, because of that, every issue felt like it mattered. And here, I kind of feel burned. Like, I kind of feel like, well, now I probably wouldn't buy an Al Ewing or Rom V appearance in a crossover, because I feel like I bought this, and, you know, whatever it's worth, $12 for something toward Dark Web. And I've read like every run of Venom leading up to this run. I just tend to read them when they're done. But I feel very much like this did such a disservice to the writers themselves, whose vision is sort of like compromised in the scope of this crossover now. And like, I totally get where you're coming from, thinking that it's so valuable to the Venom series. I worry that it turned people off to the Venom series who might be a little bit more frugally minded about their books.
You know what this reminded me of?
I will say in response to that. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say, you know what this reminded me of? It reminded me of in Inferno, Excalibur, right? Excalibur, its tie-in,
that's
great
really
call,
was like a really good set of issues, but it did nothing for the story. So like this is exactly like what it reminds me of. Like some good books existing within the story, but not really furthering it anymore.
I think the other thing is it felt like all of the elements were there for this to work. All of the stuff that was already happening in Venom, to have it brought into Dark Web, it felt appropriate. It felt like it could be there. And stuff like Normie having been the Red Goblin at one point, you know, having familiarity with symbiotes, with Norman now being Gold Goblin and being closer to Peter, it felt appropriate that Normie would be there, and then it felt appropriate that he would interact with the symbiote. It's just that there was no cohesive through line for all of the elements in Venom that work to make sense to be tied to Dark Web. We're doing the work in this room, and I talk about this a lot. Like, we as fans can talk and create the reasons why these things make sense, and that's great. I love doing it.
It's our show.
Yeah, that's our job. But like, that's also like, Marvel doesn't pay us. They have other people that they have other people that whose job it is to be like, okay, so why is this 10-year-old in a weird like half goblin, half symbiote suit? What does that mean? Like, what is that for in this crossover and in Venom? And I think they could have answered that question. All of the pieces were there to do so, but I don't feel as though they did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, Venom should have been like the Dark Web Ms. Marvel crossover, where it's like, if you're a Ms. Marvel fan, then you're reading what's happening to her during this crossover. And that should have been what it's like for Venom. It should not have been a necessary, essential part of the crossover as a core title. Venom does not make sense as a core title for this. It just doesn't. It isn't core to it. You know, you can just not read those issues, and the crossover mostly still makes sense. Reading the Venom issues only confuses you more. The main takeaway is that if you're already reading Venom, you've got some really juicy information as to the final puzzle of what is happening in Rom V and Al Ewing's Venom run. But as a Dark Web reader, you're just like, well, I don't get this. I hate the way that Brian Hitch draws people of color. Which, by the way, we need to put that out there because it's
important comment.
It sucks. Please learn how to draw people of color, Brian Hitch.
Well, as we wind down this segment, we have so much that this crossover is going to give us to milk going forward. I don't like that word in use with symbiotes, but I guess
going. It's so good.
Let's milk a symbiote. You know, we've got Summer of Symbiotes coming, so this is far from the last time we're talking about any of these characters. My final two pieces here is this Normie can only remind me of my Normie. a young man who grows up to have a symbiote of his own.
And some
some
sweet gangster tattoos.
sweet, sweet gangster tattoos that get washed away when his symbiote gets sucked into the void. But anyway, as I dream of MC2 Normie coming back to me, I would love to know where you guys stand on the sort of general state of symbiotes going forward. I'm sure we're going to continue talking about Gold Goblin. We're far from done with Norman. And of course, Steve, Jonah, the two of you, you spectacular motherfuckers, we're going to miss you so much. And we would love it if you would give your locations on the interwebs again as you give us your final thoughts.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you can find me on Twitter at HowdyDuda. That's HOWDYDUDA. That's a lot like Howdy Doody, but it's with Duda, DUDA. It's a very common Polish last name. You can find it on Twitter. As to the series, I've really loved Dark Web. I'm sad that this is the last time I get to talk about it because there's a lot of really great issues coming up later in this very podcast show that I loved reading and that I wish I had the chance to talk about. But at least you, the listener, and the audio viewer will get a great chance to see what all of my colleagues get to think about that. And I know they have some great opinions on it, so I hope you enjoy.
And you can follow me over on Twitter and Instagram at PeakJonah. That's Peak. And ultimately, I have a little bit of trouble trying to decide, in context of the metric, can we call these good issues? If the assignment is using the tools of the crossover, how does your character react into what they're going through? Did they actually hit the assignment? These are issues that I very much enjoyed, but did you do what was asked? And I think that's maybe where I'm having a little bit of a conundrum and maybe even some reservations about future crossover events, where is this how other crossover events are going to be treated, where writers don't have to really interact with this new environment, this new crossover that the title is being a part of. And I think that is going to be a lot of missed opportunities.
That's one of those things where you hear about that tablet where they found in ancient Rome where they were like, kids just have no respect and they're all listening to that crazy music with so many hardcore beats. Like, and they find that this tablet is 2,000 years old. Hearing Jonah be like, do you think this means that they're going to start letting them write crossover issues that don't tie in? I'm like, somewhere out there, Jim Shooter is laughing as he gains power in the darkness. But other than that, it has been so fucking amazing talking Dark Web, and I can't wait to come back and talk Sins of Sinister. Sins of Sinister, which we'll be talking about next week. But Summer of Symbiotes, which will certainly be on our Sinful Summer docket. But until then, we're going to take a short break, run a quick series of commercials, and we are coming back with what is probably the way everybody feels about Rec Rap. I feel about Tori Sheehan coming in and asking us questions about clones. So please don't miss it at all. Okay. I'm super excited. I'm having the best time. We came in a minute early from break. A couple of things. I just want to go over some house cleaning, as it were.
Okay.
Having such a great time doing this show. Love this new live format. It's the fucking bomb shit. And I think we've really, we've captured something magical. And I really love our team and like this like ability to have people come in and out and, this running show log. And one of the things that I'm really paying attention to is what people say back to us. Like what people are like, that's the thing, right? And something that I'm hearing a lot is I'm hearing the way you guys explain stuff to Tori.
Oh.
It works.
Love it.
And so, something that I hear a lot is people who didn't either self-indoctrinate to comics at like, I don't want to say a young age, but people who didn't self-indoctrinate to comics when they felt it was possible because there was a lack of knowledge of the gravity of the largeness of it. They often feel like their opinions aren't valid. But something that I think that's really important is comics cannot continue to only be for the people who have 37,000 issues at their disposal. And not just, due to Marvel Unlimited, but like comics can't just be for people with the time resource.
Yep.
They need to be for people who want to dial into something in a unique way and share that experience as best they can. And so, I know that sometimes you come to us and you say, my lack of knowledge is, it's a hindrance, but I think it actually acts much more as an asset to our team that you come with a really realistic knowledge base to start with. You don't come being like, this Wonder Woman, she is Superman's wife and they fight Magneto Xavier. Like, you come with like reasonable knowledge and questions. And so we just thought that we would celebrate that with a little segment all about your wonderful questions, because we asked you to read some shit for this. And you probably had no fucking clue what you were reading.
Absolutely not, my friends. I do not. I listen in sometimes, but a lot of times when it's not about something that I've read, I try not to because I'm like, maybe I'll read it someday. I don't want to, know too much. And so I didn't know a whole lot about Dark Web, so I was reading a lot of the little words in the beginning, and I think I've heard about this Peter Parker clone guy before. Where was he also hypnotized by Madeline Pryor's like snatch game? Like what? Like how'd she catch another cornbread basic boy?
I think it was like he was so broken and she was just like broken together.
Oh, she does.
That's
that
exactly what it is. And you never see the true meeting where you have no idea how they came across each other. Ben has had his memories completely destroyed, and that's a whole other thing. Just assume that happened. Maddie has had a rough life, and we don't know was there a mixer? We don't know. But Free Comic Book Day last May, one of the Free Comic Book Day issues has this moment where we get like a hint of Inferno stuff, by which I mean a mailbox comes to life and starts trying to chomp on things. It is great. And then you just see Ben Parker web slanging away, and he web slangs into an alley and is like, wow, life, am I right? And somebody's like, yeah, I heard you, bro. And it's Madeline Pryor. And immediately you just go, oh, they're both clones whose lives are horrible. Of course they should be best friends.
Right. And like it makes sense from like a thematic view.
But we never get that moment where they're like, they don't go to an IKEA and bump into each other and go, oh, like you're a clone? Me too. Right. We never see that.
Right. Is he an evil clone, or
no. He's generally a pretty good dude.
Yeah. He has been Spider-Man twice. He's taken over for Spider-Man twice. He's the last run, Spider-Man Beyond, where he took over, the Beyond Corporation did a lot and erased a lot of his memories, and that's what he's trying to get back. And the Beyond Corporation did that to keep him under his control, make him a Spider-Man they could control. And that's why he's in the state he's been. He disappeared after that, and we've seen Peter kind of search for him a little bit because he really wants to make sure his clone is all right. I mean, he really cares about Ben. Like, it's Ben obviously doesn't think so, but he really cares about Ben because he's like, oh, dude, you're me. Like, at one point in time, there was a point in time where Ben thought he was the original and Peter thought he was the clone back in the 90s. So they've got a really long, complex history.
Anytime there's a clone in Marvel, you can guarantee there's a point at which they go, but is the clone actually the real guy?
That makes sense.
Thankfully, they've never done that with Maddie.
Give it time.
But you know what? I feel like that has to do with the fact that Maddie has such a unique personality from Jean, even from day one.
Yeah.
But, to touch on something you're asking about, Tori, I think something that's worth noting is we've covered a lot of like Spider-Verse, and that became Into the Spider-Verse, which is I don't know if you've heard of these things. They're called the talkies. And in the movies, say, and so Into the Spider-Verse is a successful film franchise at this point, and there's been Spider-Verse, Spider-Geddon, Spider-Verse 2, Spider-Verse 3, 2 Into the Spider-Verses, as 2 Edge of Spider-Verses, Edge of Spider-Geddon. Now there's Spider-Man, which is a Spider-Verse based 12-issue series. And in all of that, I did the math earlier, it's like 79 issues released so far with an expected 91 or something. In all of that, Ben Parker, Scarlet Spider, figures into about 7.
See, y'all you said the words from the 90s, and I thought he was new. I thought he was new.
Kevo, can you bop in your cute little outfit?
I saw your toy.
Right, so I've had this hoodie forever. It's been in Jonah's possession. It's been in Kevo's possession. So this is actually like a coveted piece, not like, oh, I'm so special for having it. Just like, it's a common thing that a lot of people go, oh, what would have been cool? Scarlet Spider hoodie. And like, it's a pretty standard gay nerd piece. And Latino nerds. I know a lot of Latino nerds who love it.
Nice. I feel like I have seen this around at some point. Okay, well, that makes sense. I'm going to get into more about MJ and Black Cat when we get there, but is she married to a man with kids? She's not actually had kids?
So that is the mystery that's going on in the Zebula Spider-Man. So there was a 6 month period that we're told is 6 months in at least Marvel time that Peter and Mary Jane disappeared, and there are lots of clues that it was more than 6 months, and who knows exactly what's going on with the kids. But at the end of the last Spider-Man run, Peter and Mary Jane were sort of set to get back together. It really looked like they were going to in the last issue of Spider-Man Beyond. And then Zeb Wells did a time jump, and it's kind of like when Claremont did a 6 month time jump, you got to figure out what happened. Sometimes you never find out why Betsy and Jean switched powers, but sometimes.
So those are her and Peter's kids, and then she has a boyfriend.
There's her and that boyfriend, but we don't know the whole story behind that yet. That's still a mystery to us.
So there's no logical reason why MJ should have children that age if there has just been a 6 month time gap. She says, I have kids now. She never says, I am a stepmother to 2 beautiful children. Right. She did not know that guy at the end of Spider-Man Beyond. So this doesn't make sense. The big mystery is, how did she meet this man, adopt and or have his children? They grew to 5 years-ish of age. How did all of that happen? And then Peter is still behaving like, I can't believe we broke up 6 months ago.
But also sort of seeing Black Cat.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
None of this makes any sense whatsoever. And
I miss Silk. I don't want to talk about it, but I miss Cindy so bad.
Agree.
I don't want to talk about it.
Couldn't agree more. So that is... We have been wanting the two of them, MJ and Peter, back together for a very long time. Yep. So the delayed gratification in and of itself is such like the comic book trope of like, they're not back together yet, but throwing in this piece that it's like not just frustrating because like what do you do when there's kids in the mix, but also it makes no sense. Now we've got a mystery on our hands. Is it magic? Is it timelines fusing together? What weird thing happened such that these children can exist and MJ says they're hers?
And she got powers too.
And she has powers.
So we didn't. So sorry, because I walked into this and I was like, oh, there must have been like a 6-issue miniseries where they were like explored how MJ got these powers.
No.
Was she like, I'm with you on the polyamory. We'll get into that.
Well, hold on, but then
into that.
if
But,
we're
like-
doing it, we're close to time, so you know
Oh,
what
no.
I'm doing.
Okay, so like,
Oh no, we're still going to answer your question. We're just
Yeah.
bringing in help
Bring it in.
because we are not doing this segment. You know, Tori, the problem is like at any given point, I or Kevo is talking to you at that
No.
moment.
Yeah.
So I kind of forgot to ask you to introduce yourself,
Hi.
like a bad host, like that time John Mayer filled in on the Tonight Show. Bad
Well,
host,
in
bad.
fairness,
Now
a
you
lot
can't
of-
have a recording career.
a lot of what I have to say is now in these new little doohickeys here. Because my name is Tori Sheehan, and you can find me on Twitter at Tori_Sheehan. You can also find me on Instagram at smTori, but you know, the X discourse is on the Twitters these days.
Well, we'll be bringing in another voice as well to this segment. So let's bring him on in. We're going to be adding Broadway to the show to talk about some amazing heroes with us.
Hello.
Broadway, it was a big bummer when we didn't have you for a hot second, and now we've had you twice in 2 weeks, or in a week technically, and it couldn't get sexier. So please, by all means, introduce yourself and then weigh in on some Mary Jane.
Oh, I love a homophone pun. Hi guys, I'm Broadway. You can find me at bway3rd on Twitter. I apologize in advance. I kind of choked on some ramen like a matter of minutes ago, so if I'm constantly clearing my throat, that's why. Yeah. I've not been reading the Mary Jane and Black Cat series, or the Black Cat series. I know that she's been having a moment these days. So this was kind of my first foray into that. And I've never been a big Miss Marvel reader, it's no shade. I just like haven't invested. So this was a really interesting look into both of those franchises. And I really liked it.
Yeah, I enjoyed so much of it. I mean, I was in the discourse when I got assigned this, being like, so Black Cat and Mary Jane are just gonna Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy their way into the sunset without Peter, right? Like that's what this cover looks like.
I'm okay with
Right?
that.
So that was really exciting. And actually, I too have not Ms. Marveled very much. I haven't even really watched the series yet, just because I haven't had the time. But I know a little bit about her, and I was very intrigued by. She's still such a teen. I know, Kevo. I know I'm in trouble.
But Tori, I'm actually really psyched to hear you say that, because one of the things that's interesting about these 2 issues, because that's all this Miss Marvel series is, it's the 2 issues for this Dark Web thing. They really try hard to pull in every single like major element from the show. So like the friend is her friend from the show. The dude is the dude from the show. Even her like science lab buddy is her other love interest from the show. The mosque is like the major location from the show. So like they really are trying to equate the 2. And you will be the only person I think any of us know who did this first and then goes and sees the show. So I'm really interested to see how you react to knowing the elements from the page first in this particular series and then going into the show being slightly familiar and not needing to be introduced for the first time on the show.
Guy with robot hands seems real handsome and real nice, so I hope good things for him.
Yeah.
So I want to ask a little bit of a kind of conceptual question on these tie-ins. And it's something that I was really grateful for when I looked at the schedule and I really thought about the process and how it came together. And we talked about Amazing Spider-Man, the anchor, and we talked about kind of like the boy books. And now we're kind of talking about the girl books. And I mean that in like the best possible way. I mean that like girl boss girl books. And I'm thinking back to the original Limbo arc, with Excalibur, but I'm thinking even a little bit with Excalibur because Nathan made that amazing comparison before. I'm still thinking about those issues, such an amazing comparison that like it's still on my mind. I think back to the original Inferno, and I think about how Jed MacKay and Vincenzo Caruto and Brian Reber and Ariana Mar on Dark Web, Mary Jane and Black Cat, and over on Ms. Marvel, the creative team of Sabir Pirzada, Francesco Montorino, Donna Sanchez Amara, Fernando Cifuentes, and once again, Ariana Mayer. I always go out of my way to say her name multiple different ways every single episode, and because she's the best. But they're carrying on a legacy of classic arcs at Marvel, but the original Limbo arc was actually magic, but it was magic and storm. It was two women. And the idea that a young woman of color in Ms. Marvel, or that a team of two women could come together and anchor books in this new reimagined interpretation of what a crossover can be. While I feel that 140 pages might have, you could cut about 140 pages from this crossover, I wouldn't take these women from the crossover for anything. They might have been perhaps thinner issues than I would have liked, but the value that these women add to the story and the complexity that they weave into the narrative when so often we talk about a woman scorned, I think the vitalness of this much female perspective shows in the valid arguments these books make. And I would love to get your guys' perspective. Also, Belasco looks like a hot fop.
Yeah, he's very fancy and very gay to me in this, and I really do love that. He's also skinless, which, if that's your thing, I get it. I muscles for days, but it's interesting. We've talked about how some of these stories are the way in which they cross over with Dark Web is a little bit odd. The skin is the best part. Thank you, Pella. That is so true. Miss Marvel's a really interesting one because there is no consequence for her being here. It makes total sense that she's here, but she's not pulling in a lot of her back catalog to be here. The only thing is kind of the inventor is a previous villain for her, but she's not in the middle of a major crossover. She's not doing a bunch of stuff that is almost bogged down by Dark Web. Because she is a lab assistant at Oscorp, it kind of makes sense that she's here. So it really works out that we get these two issues that are of no consequence to her. This is not going to be something that gets brought up a lot in the next Miss Marvel ongoing. And if you miss these two for whatever reason, you will not be unable to understand Miss Marvel's life at all, which is great because it just means she can be awesome. Mary Jane and Black Cat, it's kind of, they are in a unique situation in that they're getting their start here, and then their stuff is going to continue out of Dark Web. They're at the end of this, they're not done with their mission for Belasco. They've got to keep going. So that's really interesting because this crossover really shuts down in almost every way. X-Men are good, Spider-Man's good, Venom's moving on. We're all out. We're not doing Dark Web anymore, except Black Cat and Mary Jane are in the middle of their mission when this thing just shuts off. So they're going to keep going. And I think I think the women and the women-centric issues are the ones that are truly done correctly for more minor secondary tie-in issues in this series.
I'll let you guys go.
I was really glad that you said that because I was really worried that this was just one of those things where two issues came out and then they went, pull the plug.
We're done.
And so to hear you say that makes me very excited.
Yeah, they're getting 5. So it's a bummer insofar as it's not an ongoing, because if it were an ongoing, I could truly believe they would eventually make out. 5, I don't think we've got enough time to get them there, but maybe we're getting another 5 after this.
Maybe.
They took a human and a cat and they said, how many lives did they have between them? 9 and 1, 10, average it. 5.
Pudding.
It's math.
No, actually, I can follow him on that. That is, yeah. But it's really more about how there's 8 in between, and so 4, and so.
Math.
Broadway, go ahead. Broadway, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I really appreciate what Nico was saying about the way in which this event includes, central to the cast are just a host of women between Hallows Eve and Madeline Pryor. But then in these two tie-ins, these two sets of tie-ins, you also have women from the Marvel Universe. And I appreciate, I think that Dark Web is an event that I enjoy because it's not asking too much. It is not a colossal event. But it does, for certain characters and for the characters that it interacts with, it does push them forward. So to create space for these women to participate, to have their own voices, to have their own unique stories. Like, none of them are damsels. None of them are in the same boat as Maddie, where it's like a woman scorned. I like that a lot. And I think also, as a person who was not reading Miss Marvel or the ongoing sagas of Black Cat and Mary Jane, like, I appreciated being thrown in, and it did have some, it was a little confusing, I think, at first, especially Mary Jane having superpowers, but the confusion didn't last super long. I felt embraced by the book in a way that sometimes in crossover, especially for tie-ins, when they're pulling on threads around the event, that can be really confusing. I guess maybe the easiest example would be something like, I don't know, X-Men Red's tie-ins for Judgment Day might be a little confusing for somebody who doesn't know what's going on in X-Men Red. Now,
or Judgment Day, you'd be fucking.
Like I did. I read the X books like I need them to breathe, but there was a way in which I could see someone being fully confused as to why is this happening on Mars? What is a Uranus? Like, why is there an eyeball lady? And I felt like these events didn't have that problem. You'd probably need to know who Belasco is. And you probably need to know that Miss Marvel is a Muslim, and knows Spider-Man. But beyond that, like, I didn't know she worked at Oscorp until.
And she's BFF with Miles.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think for me, the way that there were, because both MJ and Black Cat are keeping secrets from each other and haven't seen each other in a while. Both of them coming with, whoa, you did this, and whoa, you doing that, and both of them not telling each other things and also not telling us things means that we are along for the secrets ride as opposed to just being confused because everyone else knows what's going on. I was really glad that when Spider-Man showed up, he said he was heading back to Brooklyn. I was like, aha, this is a Miles Morales, not another Spider-Man, not a weird Spider-Man. So that was
clones here.
You're right. That was really helpful.
No clones.
Was I supposed to? But were they trying to tell us that the bird people were clones that were dead, reanimated?
Yes.
And that the birds
did they exist before this?
The inventor did.
Okay. So the Thomas Edison one.
He is a primary villain for Kamala.
Okay, gotcha.
The fact that there are now others that are based on other birds is
great.
It's new info. Surprise, new info.
I love that.
Way to give Marie Curie the least aggressive bird.
Right?
Yeah. How rude.
Because I'm pretty sure her. Yeah, I mean, she's just straight up radioactive.
I was gonna say, that's she's dealing with stuff.
What I loved about the Miss Marvel book is they both did two different things. Miss Marvel really seemed to be a good jumping on point for MCU fans who've watched the show to see where Kamala is in the comic universe. So it did a really good job of setting up her status quo, and I think in that it really justified her being in the tie-in because she is really right now basically a Spider-Man character showing up in Amazing Spider-Man working for Oscorp. So she does have her own things and she has her own lore, and I love that one of the things I really love that it did is it had Miles help talk to the mosque and not make it a Kamala issue, because what he said to her was like, I never really saw you as the Muslim superhero. I saw you as a superhero for all of us. That I really think that helped drive the point home, because I think some writers in the past might have been like, oh, cool, we've got to have Kamala solve that problem with the mosque in the community and not let another character do it, because while she was out there doing the super heroics work to save the day. The one thing I do like about Black Cat and Mary Jane is, instead of setting the place for where that character is, and it really does drive Miss Marvel's story forward, but like I think Black Cat and Mary Jane really drives their story forward in a way that is totally different. It really furthers the mystery behind what's going on with Mary Jane. The jackpot powers are so crazy. I mean, like, right after Mephisto did all of his stuff, we were like, ooh, it's jackpot Mary Jane, but now she is basically. I mean,
yeah, it's like that magic I was saying, like brand new day all over again.
Yeah,
it's
I think Black Cat's bad luck is what's giving Mary Jane some issues.
Could be. It's there have been times she's been described as a low-level mutant, and then there's times that there's like she doesn't have any superhero powers. So I don't know what the real answer is. It just depends on who's writing her at the time and what office is like, oh yeah, you can make her that or you can't. So but I do like how Mary Jane and Black Cat actually reconceptualize some of the Limbo lore in with Belasco, right? So it was never really established before that a soul sword or a soul weapon makes you the ruler of Limbo. It's sort of anecdotally been seen that way, because we've mainly seen Ileana be the ruler of Limbo, and when she was dead, her soul sword was passed on to different people. Kate never really seemed like she was the leader of Limbo, so like I'm like, okay, cool, maybe Limbo was leadership at that point in time. But then when Margali and Amanda claimed the mantle of Limbo, they took the soul sword itself. And Belasco even at one point took Ileana's soul sword to try to run Limbo. The weird thing about, to me, Belasco having this hunt for his soul sword to try to claim Limbo, now that Madeline doesn't have her soul scythe or to take over from her, is I think he's forgetting that somebody else has a soul sword.
Yeah. There's so much stuff they're doing to these magical weapons, like with locks as well, which not on a bagel, but Legion of X.
Yeah.
Where I'm sort of just
okay,
like,
that makes sense.
Oh, the Hope Sword? Yeah.
Well,
the
and
Hope
then
Sword, I'm just like,
Pixie has her dagger. Like,
I also didn't know there was more than one soul sword. So when he was like, my soul sword, I was like, oh no, the blonde girl lost her sword.
Tori, I think that's what you are actually pointing out, is that I don't know that these rules are so codified that they matter.
No.
So what's going to be really interesting to see is, are we about to get the final word? Like, are we about to get a writer who finally says, like, here's how it works? And like, a soul sword is just a really good thing to show up to when you demand the crown, or it is mechanically required in some capacity. We are at a place right now where we might really be getting an answer to that particular question. And then also, like, with what Cy Spurrier is doing, what the fuck is a hope sword and how does it come into play? Can't wait to hear if there's an answer. But this also could just be one of those things that, like, a bunch of different writers just randomly took passes at this idea really fast, all at the same time, and we don't get anything out of it other than, like, a new set of writers in 5 years is going to come up and be like, well, I remember the Hope Sword. Now I'm going to be the one who writes the definitive, this is how you take over Limbo.
Right.
Oh.
Is the Earth Girls thing a joke, or is that like a
Joke.
real, like, okay, it's a joke.
But now,
Okay.
I mean, but is it though? Because
It's kind of meta because it's a joke, but it also is true.
It's true
Mm.
because you've had the past few rulers of Limbo have been Ileana, Margali Zardos, Amanda Sefton, and then Ileana. So they're all
And Madeline Pryor.
and Madeline Pryor. Why did I forget Madeline Pryor?
Madeline
And
Pryor.
briefly, Ben
Why did I
Riley. Spoiler
Yeah.
alert.
Yeah, and Ben Riley. I mean, but he's an Earth Girl, whatever.
Oh. Yeah, Earth girl, like girl, you know.
I mean, that-
But even like girl, like the way we're always like, oh, the female characters have all the feelings. Not we are because we're evolved humans, but like the way like Neanderthal comic fans are like, oh, the women come in and they have all the feelings. Ben has like an exceptional number of like my butt hurt feelings. And like I think between Ben and Peter's a little bit more like chill bro, just wants to sell you weed and get the head, you know what I mean? But like Ben really wants to fucking talk about it.
Yeah. What I do love about this event is letting the story of the Soul Sword be told now and reconceptualized through Jed McKay, who is really, I mean, yes, Jed McKay is running Moon Knight, but he's really running sort of the Marvel magic aspect of it right now with Strange going into Doctor Strange. That's like sort of like the like be all end all of magical books from Marvel. So like he's sort of setting the tone in a Black Cat story, which he also sets the tone for like all Black Cat stories. So like he's really claiming his stake of the Marvel universe with this. I'll gladly forget, like, as research for this, I did reread the Soul Sword trilogy and Excalibur, which is forgettable, and don't read it now because there's a lot of stuff that has been contradicted, and it's better just forget about. There's no need to remember there was a Soul Steel Eye.
Except it looked cool. But
It did look cool. And the wielder was the Soul Steel Eye and the Soul Sword couldn't be in the same dimension, or it would cause her shrill, incredible pain to be in the same dimension. So let's forget about that. We can just forget about that. But I do like the idea that a Soul Sword is really the driving force of leadership and the Sorcerer Supreme of Limbo. It's like the thing. So like Ileana could step in at any point, but then do y'all think that Pixie at some point could go and claim rulership of Limbo with her soul dagger?
Well, so
I
here's
feel
my
like it's
question
turning
to
into
you.
oh
Sorry.
no, I yield the floor.
Yes.
Are you saying that you like it as a mechanical requirement, or you just like the idea that like it's something that makes you powerful, and so you are then up to snuff to go challenge for the throne?
I like it in that second aspect where it means you're powerful enough to go up and challenge for the throne of Limbo, because that was really in Storm and Ileana. That was really what happened to Ileana. Like, she was able to make her weapon, which was her soul sword, when she was trying to make the acorn to plant the tree like Storm did. But her anger caused her to create the sword, which made her able to fight for the rulership of Limbo.
I agree. Like, I don't like the idea that it is like somehow the magic requires that you must have a soul sword or you cannot take the throne. But I like the idea that it is kind of a rite of passage that sort of shows that you are ready. And yeah, I mean, like, for me, Pixie is like one of the ultimate unsung. It would be super cool to see her show up. If not become ruler of Limbo, like really take the next step in whatever she's going to be in trying to become and trying to challenge for the throne at least.
No.
Why?
No.
Why?
No, because her dagger's too small and it's turned into the Force a little bit, where like I have the higher ground. I have the soulier sword. My sword is soulier, and we're running a little bit long, which is totally cool. But because this is actually like an X-Men topic, Jake, you're coming in.
Oh, and he's gonna have opinions too.
Oh my!
So Jake, you're coming in. But I think
like what's a sim though?
So sim is sim is you put it in your phone. with your fucking number. No,
But he looks like a troll.
He's like a super hot built demon who has the exact right body
He's
type,
also a piece
but
of shit.
he's literally too gross to be real, kind of like the trajectory of Mindy Kaling's writing. So
Well, there's two different ways now. He's like
Well,
family
now.
man dad, and also he's like Ilyana's abuser.
He also, they have him in this looking like a diaper baby leather daddy. It's a lot of gay subculture crossover that I don't want.
And Mid-Atlantic
this is the
Leather
world
Weekend
Rob
was
Halford wanted for
a
us.
little too real.
Sim is actually a character that was created as a ripoff of Cerebus, right? Because the creator
Yeah.
was Dave Sim.
Dave
yeah.
Sim.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like, yeah. So like
That's rough. That's rough, buddy.
Yeah. So
Thank you. I am proud of my Mindy Kaling joke. Thank you.
Broadway,
Your
say what you were
excellence.
saying again.
Oh, I was just saying that Mid-Atlantic Leather Weekend in DC just recently happened. So Sim in like his leather vest was like a little too...
Cross promotional.
Yeah. It was
We're
like,
just
I
trying
could
to get
see
the
you
audience
there,
in.
but I don't know if I want to because you're kind of a dick.
The Scruff. It's the Pitts crew.
Yeah.
I love how relevant Torn Gronbeck's Last Valkyrie series has been, because there's Sims showed up and Dream Queen showed up again, and I'm like,
And then that kind of ties into Thor crossing over with Venom before Venom crossed over into this. Like, it's weird how much there's a thing happening, but it's like almost by accident. And it feels like there's nobody at the wheel at Marvel who's like, okay, this is intentional and here's where we're going with it.
Well, it's
Like,
a strange kind of synergy, isn't it? And sometimes you do get these writers who are given these random assignments, but will carry their story through the random assignments.
The Symergy.
Synergy. Well, I'm reminded when like Nicieza was writing back in the day, he got cut off one book and then brought the story to another book to finish it, which I think that's what some writers are probably working on now, because it's still hard to tell how many issues a person's going to get for a particular book anymore.
like Steve Englehart.
And you're so right.
I
was about to say, man, this is the project we're doing.
Dude loved her so much he took her to different publishers.
Oh yeah, that's right. Mantis is a cross universal character.
Yeah, 3
there is-
universes.
There is something interesting going on right now in the Marvel Magic realm of things. And I think a lot of X-Men fans have been increasingly noticing this. But between, I really feel like the catalyst, the big catalyst was probably the death of Doctor Strange, because I feel like that brought all of these like forces together. I mean, there's that. And I think the last issue of Death of Doctor Strange, there's all of the various Sorcerers Supreme like working together. Then you have Maddie and Ilyana and the Labors of Magic. You have Clea having her own situation. You also have, you have Excalibur to Knights of X to Captain Britain, but you also then have the Mysterium of it all. Celine and Covenant Kaba. There's like something clearly going on here.
Strange Academy 2, where you've got magic as a teacher. You've got,
Right.
Wait, Tori, do you want to leave? Tori, do you want to leave?
So many words.
So many words.
Something's wrong with magic. Oh no.
Okay, Tori, we kept you. So, Tori, do you want to say your sign off, and that you love us still, and that we love you forever?
Bye, everyone. Thanks for teaching me things. My name is Tori. You can find me on the internet at smTori on Instagram and Tori_Sheehan on Twitter. Good luck. God bless. Enjoy.
Oh, and this is, of course, me and Tori's incredible show featuring art by Tori, the Billy Club pod. Man, I love that really great fucking frame of me up in the upper left, Kevo. Damn, son. That's some real good editing. Thank you.
I look great in the upper right, so that's what we get for being on camera. Bye, everybody.
Tori, as always,
Bye.
thank you.
Bye.
And Kevo, I think I accidentally moved us over to X-Men Dark Web. If you just want to throw that slot of things, okay.
But I want to continue Broadway's point, because I think you're totally right that there's a lot going on in the world of Marvel Magic. There is some heavy like cross pollination between that and the X world. Defenders came out too. Both recent Defenders series were heavy Marvel Magic development stories. And like cosmology development stories. I think that they're really putting some serious energy into it.
Well, and I think it was smart that you brought up Death of Doctor Strange as the first part, because Jackie Chopra showing up in that, and then that being such a huge part of the end of Legion of X, with the end of Legion of X being huge, but we don't know how yet. It's going to be a while before we get there.
And even Orcus now hiring
Margali.
Hiring magic people, is not just scientists. I would imagine they probably have also connected on the low with Kavanakaba, but like clearly there's like something, there's a thread being built there. I mean, even Last Annihilation involves space and magic.
Yeah.
And
because Billy's in the mix,
and there's a magic space sword.
Dr. Doom taking the magic, if I remember correctly, it ends with Dr. Doom after they defeat Dormammu. He like takes a bunch of that magic, and like it turns out that he was working on the low with the scary Skrull priestess lady, and we haven't picked up on that again since. But like clearly there was something happening there. I mean, again, it's also related to Mysterium and his conversation with Storm about like meddling in higher stuffs. I don't know what the full scope of things looks like. I mean, I guess that was kind of what TK was saying, was that there is something happening here, but we don't exactly know the trajectory. And so at the moment, it looks like sometimes intentional, sometimes haphazard cross-pollination. Jackie Chopra being in Curse of the Ebony Blade, then Death of Doctor Strange, and now Legion of X is like clearly intentional. But then there's other stuff.
That's just Psy Superior.
That's like all Psy. There's other stuff where I'm like, I mean, even Mordred, like the impetus for him dying and then being resurrected in Knights of X is, I believe, Curse of the Ebony Blade.
And we've got Captain Britain coming out very soon,
right?
Which I think could offer some answers. But then we've got, to bring it back to this, we've got, we're talking about Dark Web X-Men #3, the final issue of Dark Web X-Men, which really takes us into the very final part of Dark Web. And this is, of course, written by Jerry Duggan with art by Phil Noto and Rob Rice, VC's Corey Pettit on letters. And, where Maddie ends up at the end of this, I think, is possibly an important pillar for what we're talking about in the setup for whatever is going on with Marvel Magic, and where Limbo ends up at the end of this, which we won't touch too much on that, but like the point being that I think this was part of the layout, and it starts with this issue in which we finally sort of start to get the resolution we've been waiting literal decades for. Jacob, you didn't quite get to introduce yourself, so please feel free to do so, and then take a second if you would like to talk about this status quo that we got, that I think you were dubious that we would get in the first place, but I know you've also been waiting for your entire adult and child life too, so this has been a long time coming.
Mama Maddie got her justice. Hi, everyone. I'm Jake. You can find me on Twitter at Omega Sentinel. That's like, Mega Sentinel. And you can also find me on Instagram if you really go looking.
And wait, is that where you farm? Is that where you heart farms? Wait, no. Damn it. I was trying to be
bloody,
cute.
right?
It's
right?
Heart harms. It's the heart farmer, as in, rake and a hoe and a piece of fertile ground, and hearts come out of it. And yes,
so oh my god.
Yes, I have been waiting a very long time for this story, this arc, this resolution, because man, the end of Inferno was so cruel to poor Madeline Pryor. Poor Madeline Pryor, who never had a chance. Poor Madeline Pryor, who was a clone, who was Scott's second choice, who had the baby. Jean didn't even have the baby. And who got like
herself
in a kitchen,
and then got shot in the head.
You know she had to use a kitchen knife to get that umbilical cord off, and that's like a nightmare. So
she did.
So she, she did all the work and got none of the reward to be mom, And I know that, the thing that leaves me hanging with this story is that I don't love the essential identity that Madeline is like Cable's mom. Like that she hasn't really gotten very far off of that. But she's just back now. So if this is her starting point, sure, let's get her further. I'm glad that she has had some resolution with Jean. I really thought Jean was going to be the block that stood in the way, but Uncle Jerry. I started off hating this series, thinking that it was going to go bad, and I used very strong language. I said I think misogyny was somewhere in my tweet about it in the first issue. But I've come round, and I cried a bunch because it was very sweet. And yeah, I want to hear what everyone else thought.
I did not expect this from Jerry Duggan. I did not. It was, it's heartfelt. It was like amazing. It was poignant. Like Jean wasn't the one who was standing in the way, preventing Maddie from being resurrected, which I kind of was like, is she the one who's doing it or not?
Mm-hmm.
And like, I loved that aspect of it. I loved that that Jean just wants Maddie to try to be her own person. And it's past the weird tension they would have whenever they would meet up, which did they really meet up after Inferno? Because
Maddie was dead.
But I'm like, I'm remembering X-Men 25, and I'm like, oh wait, was that the Red Queen? Was that an alternate?
That was alternate Jean Grey, I think, by that point.
Yeah, but I'm like,
it's so confusing.
Yeah, so confusing. And
Nico, sound off.
I agree with you. Oh no, I just want to jump in and agree. I completely agree because I was like, I actually when I stepped away, I listened in, so I just kept listening on the live stream. But I completely agree with what you guys are talking about. I actually think it is really heartfelt. The main complaint I have is that I don't think that issues 1 and 2 feel like they make any sense with issue 3.
No,
I think issue 1 and 2, she's like, I want to kill some fucking babies.
Mm-hmm.
And in issue 3, she's like, I just wish someone had ever been nice to me, ever. And like, that's my Maddie. And my Maddie is a woman who doesn't want to just hurt people.
Yeah.
She's been hurt, but she's not like, because if you're like, oh, I've been hurt, so I get to hurt anybody I want. Okay, well, great. Then everybody on the X-Men is a supervillain.
Mm-hmm.
And there was some sort of weird, I don't know. I just think it was exactly the kind of ending I needed. And it really pulled 1 and 2 out. Because I liked 1 and 2, but there really was something about the fact that who Maddie is she's always telling us she's better than Jean. So be it. If you're so much better than Jean, actually be better than Jean. Jean ate a planet one time. Okay, so what? You're gonna fucking devour New York with Limbo?
Again.
That's not better. So she had one fire, so you found a bitchier fire? Like, what we really need to think about here is who is Madeline Pryor and what does she represent? She represents women who are othered in a community of people who are othered. It's unfortunate that the othered person in an othered group is a straight white woman. That's, troubling. But if what we're saying is othered people in an othered community have carte blanche to be really not who they say they are, the hypocrisy of it is the issue. Because I think many people I've met who are othered in othered communities are people of their word. And when Maddie says she's not going to destroy the world, I want to be able to believe her. And I really didn't feel it was until issue 3 where they remembered she had a heart.
Well,
go ahead.
There, go.
I wonder if that's because she didn't have a new script. And I think that Dark Web 3 is the development. It starts with Vita's run, but I think that Dark Web 3 really is the moment where, like, and I guess Dark Web finale, Dark Web Dawn, which I will leave because you guys are gonna talk about it after this. But I feel like it's finally Maddie getting a new script. And I think that the beginnings of this are like, well, this is the easiest, most familiar path for me, is to exact vengeance, is to make other people hurt, with the presumption in her mind that Jean would never work with her. Yeah. Right? The whole Cerebro drive is about the idea that, like, I have to take this from you, I have to fool you, I have to, like, fuck with your head to get you to do what I want. And she never imagined that Jean is on some new shit just as much as Maddie is, and that Jean is a good enough person to have wanted Maddie to be resurrected and be her own person. And I think that once that connection happened, it's like, oh, I actually really can do something new here. I can, like, be a different person, and try to find purpose beyond externalizing my pain. And I do think, to what Nico was saying, I've encountered many people othered within their own sort of othered or marginalized community. I'm like a Black queer person. That's, like, often the reality. And there are those moments where you could see where somebody doesn't have a new script and they are reverting back to, they are just sort of recontextualizing the violence done to them, versus being like, no, actually what that person did was wrong, the way I was treated was wrong, but I have to do something different, in part because I might be perpetuating that cycle. I might be making someone as miserable as I was. So let me be good or try something new or be innovative in a way that, you know, as spiteful as it sounds, in a way that the people who othered you were not, you know? You can do something different. You can do something that doesn't revolve around externalizing your suffering onto other people.
And I think maybe one of the things that was missing from Dark Web in terms of, like, from a writerly perspective, that speaks to kind of, Nico, what I know has been your complaint about Maddie, and I also think it speaks to what Broadway has said, is that both Jean and Maddie never reflect on page about their regrets and the things they could have done better. Jean really could have spoken to Maddie, and that could have helped a lot. Maddie was alive on the
girl's
island.
got MCI. She can do a lot.
There are a lot of options. Maddie, there are reasons why it happened, but she did try to kill her kid and other kids. And all it takes is saying, holy shit, do I regret that? And regardless of the fact that, you know, things happened to me that put me over that edge, we all have a point of personal responsibility. You know, Jean is just now in Judgment Day taking some personal responsibility for some of her worst stuff. And so we're seeing it happen. I think it is a bit of a failure of writing to not put those things canonically on panel. It doesn't need to be a big thing, but where somebody says, man, do I have regrets? Because if that's established, then what Jean and Maddie are doing is having, like, a sisterly fight at a certain point, which is almost cute. And, like, it's a very sweet, and then healing begins because there's sort of an acknowledgement of, like, we both admit our human moment. And I think where 3 feels weird is that a switch is kind of flipped in a way that isn't quite organic, and the missing organic piece is that lack of acknowledgement. And so it goes from I murder people to, like, oh man, like, I'm just, like, now I'm fighting with my sister and now we're gonna go do the good thing. And we're just missing, like, even a couple panels, couple pages, couple panels where somebody is like, I could do better. And that could have really bridged the gap. Not having it doesn't ruin the series, but I think it is this kind of small missing piece. And I think it's something we see in X-Men a lot. I think I'm worried it's happening with Sage's alcoholism. There's just always a couple little pieces missing where somebody needs to say the thing that takes us from a huge giant mess to things getting better, you kind of can't just flip the switch. There has to be even a minor transition.
I think the one thing you have to remember though is like I think Jean probably couldn't have gotten to this moment where she's able to have this conversation with Maddie without going through Judgment Day. I think
Jean got a lot more time.
Yeah, because I think that like Jean going through Judgment Day and having to be faced with some of her failures, her regrets, her worst actions, you know, that's probably part of what enabled her to be able to do this. Because I mean, we have to remember the whole reason that Maddie even got imbued with the Phoenix Force memories is because Jean rejected them, and Jean in effect caused Maddie to come into being by rejecting that part of herself.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like in a perfect world, I would like Maddie to take as much time as Jean took in Judgment Day to have that catharsis. I'm saying in believing that we're probably not getting that because, like, you know, I understand how editorial works. You do need like even one page or one panel in which Maddie can say, like, I recognize my own mistakes. The fact that we don't have it is, for me, the one really glaring missing piece of her story in Dark Web. In a perfect world, it would be like a 4th issue that is her really dealing with that stuff. Knowing that that can't happen, I think just on-panel acknowledgement is still missing.
And to that end, things that are sadly going to be cut from where they should be, I do believe we are in a position to say goodbye to the wonderful Jake and B-Way. So I think we got to get some last thoughts and some sign-offs again, because we want everybody to be able to find you guys all over the interwebs, wherever you are. Not like in a find you way, not like in a way where Neve and Cammy would need to get intervening, but...
Well, if Jerry had been writing this kind of character work from the go with X-Men, I think I would have enjoyed the book overall a lot more, because I thought this was some really solid character work while moving the story forward. I thought the conversations, I thought that the conversations running between Cyclops and Havoc once they were imprisoned were pretty interesting. I mean, it's a continuation of the old conflict they've been having forever, but it seems like Havoc is ready to like step out and be his own man again, which is always a fun, bold move for him.
However long it lasts.
But he's going to do it in Limbo with his ex, so that's going to go really well for him, I'm sure. He is still working with the same script, so to speak. But yeah, it was really satisfying seeing some forward movement. I do also wish that Jean could eat some crow, because she's had some really bad moments with the Madeline stuff, like from, you know, basically being like, oh, Madeline, that self-righteous bitch, when she sacrificed herself with the X-Men in right before the Outback era. Like, she I get that she was upset that she was replaced when she was dead several times, but she never had a good reason for hating Maddie and hating on Maddie the way she did. And I was glad that it turned out she was in support of her resurrection the whole time.
Yeah, I think my last thoughts is I really appreciated the work that Duggan has done himself and also picked up on again from Hellions and from Vita Al's run of New Mutants. I appreciated the continuation of that work with Maddie, into making her a character that, you know, has a history, but has an easier point to onboard on for new readers. I also really liked that this story did not regress the relationship between Ileana and Maddie after work had been done to bring them closer. I think that this sets a very good spot where it opens Madeline and Havoc and Ileana, for that matter, up to new adventures, and does not keep them anchored to external forces, whether it be for Ileana, Belasco, and Limbo, whether it be for Maddie, Jean, and the Inferno, for Havoc. the Inferno and Cyclops. It's them trying to do something new, which I feel like is so the spirit of Krakoa, and I really appreciate that spirit was extended to a character like Madeline Pryor, because much like, Nanny and Orphan Maker or whomever, I don't think that most people were checking to see that development. And so seeing it happen, I think, is smart. I think it's smart usage of this event and the real estate in it. And I think it's heartfelt. I think for a lot of fans, it means a lot. And for a lot of just like readers in general, I like a story where a woman is not anchored to her deepest trauma. So yeah, I guess that's the last thoughts from me. You can find me on Twitter at bway3rd. I will be there.
Oh, and you can find me at there. Forgot to sign up. Sorry.
Well, guys, thank you so much for talking about Maddie and her trauma and her future, and for helping us get to the end of Dark Web. And I think we, the hosts, are going to take some time to talk about where we are at the end of all this and where we might be going forward. So thank you guys both, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Thank you guys.
Oh, wait. Okay. So I just thought of something. Like, doesn't sometimes Havoc's obsession with Maddie feel a little bit like Charlie from It's Always Sunny and The Waitress?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, especially because now I can't stop imagining Dennis as Cyclops.
It's also really great too because the waitress turns out is kind of a garbage person as well.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. She is.
And so, like, nobody's good here. And like, I mean, like, I think we all love Maddie more now. I think we all like can see Alex writing the Havoc Man cometh and tricking Maddie into showing up for it. But like, just to make clear that none of us are perfect.
Yeah. Havoc could totally pull off the butt dance too.
Yes, 100%.
But
we've got to talk about the end of Dark Web finale. Dawn, King Chasm having taken the scythe. We agree that maybe was not the most plausible scythe stealing we've ever seen.
No. I mean, she like Frankenstein her. Like, she literally put on her Frankenstein mask and like knocked her off the castle. Like,
yeah. So here's the thing. Okay, here's my thing.
I love Hallow's Eve, but
all right, here. There's just another way to start it. It's got to get a little squinty. But okay. I love the idea, the simplistic childlike idea that having, because like, okay, I want to take a step back. I think you're right, Nathan, that there is something to be said about the codification of you must have a soul weapon to be the Limbo leader. But I do think there is something to be said about the Star Warsification of it, where it's sort of like who's got the higher ground. So then my problem becomes, I can even accept that having your soul weapon knocked out of your hand could throw you off for a second. But I do not believe magic forged of your soul is so fickle that somebody else is just going to pick it up and run with it. Somebody with no magical knowledge, no magical experience, who earlier in the issues had to be like, I just sort of know how to read this because I was told how to read this real quick. Like, it's not like he's a sorcerer. Yeah. So, yeah, I feel like it undersells Maddie that she can just be so depowered so quick, and that she's not is important. Yeah. But it made several pages kind of not worth reading for me.
Because the soul swords never worked that way, even when it's been transferred before. Like, Amanda had to magically transfer the soul sword to her and then to Margali to even transfer it from Kate. So like it never worked that way before at all. Like, ever. They had to stick it in fucking Kurt. They had to like be like, oh, we're gonna stick the fucking thing in you and hide it and you don't know what's in there.
If we can accept that we needed Maddie to be good by the end of the X-Men issue, and we were not done we needed time to wrap things up. And so we get kind of a sloppy, from a mechanical believability perspective, transfer of big bad status. Where are we in Dark Web finale? Like, what does this do for you?
Why didn't Ben get the same ending Maddie got?
Because that's actually, I think, the problem here, right? And I'm with you. That I've been asking myself that for a hot minute because Teak read the book before me and was like, "Oh, well, what do you think of the ending?" And I was kind of like, "Wait, what do you mean that's the ending?" And he was like, "You did not see that coming?" And I was like, from where 1 and 2 left me, no, I didn't see Maddie getting a full redemption story, but Maddie is sad that she's always second place when she has so much more to offer. She never asked to be born, but what she has to offer is so much greater than second place, and she will not be somebody's second choice, which is why she loves Alex, because she's Alex's first choice. And that's easy for her because, not like easy, like everything else in her life is hard, but being someone's first choice comes easy. Ben is literally the second choice even in this story.
Yeah.
He can't have the good ending because he is just that other guy. That's it. He's just the other guy, which is sort of a damnation.
Do you think him having a good ending would set it up where he's potentially like brought up as a future Spider-Man always instead of just like one-off sort of things? Like, do you think that character has to be in that spot to be that character?
I think, yeah. Okay. So I think the problem I think the problem with Chasm and Scarlet Spider and whatever he's going by that day is that there is a duality of being the clone, right? And because, like, we could play a quick game. Somebody name an Amazing Maddie story. Inferno. Somebody name an Amazing Maddie story. Fall of the Mutants. Somebody
the Genosha story.
The Genosha story. Somebody name an Amazing Maddie story, and you just can't stop. Somebody name an Amazing Ben Reilly story. I'll wait.
Okay, it was really cool when he was in the New Warriors.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
There's no good story, though. There's good ideas, and there's good single issues. Immediately I say Death of Doctor Strange Spider-Man. Amazing issue between him and Felicia doing what a Spider-Man does. That's not a story. That's not an arc. That's not where is Ben going? How is Ben different than Peter? Who is Ben Reilly? No idea. There's no story. There are just good ideas and good places where he shows up.
Spider-Man Beyond's a good story, but it destroys Ben Reilly as a character as a necessity for the story. So, okay, I see what you're doing.
And, like Kevo says, someone said to me earlier in one of our comments, Kevo, producer, said, someone said to me earlier when I mentioned Ben Reilly is in this, is he still around? And that's something we talk about a lot on this show. The cultural perception of what something is outstrips what it is. So because Maddie's had so many amazing stories, and frankly, she didn't get a great shake in Hellions, but she was interesting in it and had a good arc. She had a great arc in New Mutants.
Yeah.
But what does Ben Reilly have? He's the clone. Maddie is the woman scorned and the mother of Cable. And Scarlet Spider is a really cool action figure.
Great outfit. Scarlet Spider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it makes me like scratch my head a little bit, because if Scarlet Spider is this great idea that can't get executed well, and Madeline Pryor is an excellent execution of, frankly, a faulty idea that one woman can just be a replacement for another, it leads me to wonder what the fusion here is worth. Because, like, I love that we see Kamala have a great relationship with the Spider World. I love that Black Cat and Mary Jane have this great relationship, and I love Gold Goblin, and I'm fine with this Venom run. It's probably not my favorite Venom run, but there's nothing wrong with it. But like, those are all things that were already the case. The only real changes here were Ben, Maddie, and Limbo, essentially.
Yeah.
I just don't think it was worth the event.
So
I just don't think it was worth the event.
I wanna push you on Limbo. Ben and Maddie, I maybe agree with. I mean, Maddie really did need the redemption arc. I don't know how we get it to her, and I don't know that this event justified how we got it to her. But Limbo as demonic magic Krakoa feels like important for some new status quo and some new groundwork. Like that could pay dividends in storylines going forward.
I think it has to.
Yeah.
It has to, but I'm questioning the mechanics of Limbo, like Mojo World at the same time. Like,
Yeah,
because
I think I think it's nothing but questions. It's going to be editorially and what writer sets. I mean, I think whatever rules you suggest now, if I suggested different ones, neither of us is right. Neither of us is wrong either. It's just what some writer's going to come along and probably take like one, that I said was going to be the case and one that you said, and those are going to be our Limbo rules. And until it's Schrodinger's hell dimension, until somebody tells us what's there, everything is technically possible and technically true.
like is Limbo a pocket dimension, a splinter realm? Because it's a splinter realm. It's been described in as such. Is it a splinter realm only to the 616 universe, or is it a multiversal splinter realm? And like, if it's so weird, if it's a multiversal splinter realm that has an embassy to the 616 New York.
Except it can't be a multiversal splinter realm because we've met different Ilyanas who are also leaders of Limbo.
But then how do those Ilyanas exist if they're not multiversal?
Well, I mean, but then this is one Limbo. This can only be our Limbo. This has to be a singular versal Limbo as opposed to a multiversal Limbo. So like every world
Limbo
would have
isn't a
its
hub
own
for the
Limbo.
multiverse. The multiverse has Limbos for every individual universe.
But then
Yeah.
how did we get the Ilyana that came back to our universe and died of the legacy virus? If there's and like, how do we get the other X-Men? How do we get the Storm from Storm and Ilyana? Like, there's weird questions that like the weird continuity nerd in me is like, wait, how? But sometimes you just gotta forget it.
And I think that's part of the kind of butterfly effect I've been really trying to pitch lately, where when someone changes someone else's past, the ripple effect is eventually going to hit our characters. And if this is always happening, because like the one I keep pointing to is everybody's so psyched for Apocalypse to come back, but I'm really hoping it's Hawk's Apocalypse and not, for instance, Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix Apocalypse.
Oh, God, yeah.
And how can that be the same character? They literally tell us he's just some frail little old man who wears an apocalypse suit. Like, how can that be the same character? It can't be. There had to be a change at some point that changed that canon, because some of Rise of the Apocalypse, which was a canon miniseries that gets referenced in the 12, which is canon, can't be true. So I think what we need to do is sort of allow for the recodification, right?
Okay.
The day Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver are mutants, again, that they're not now, but again, I'm just going to pretend that they always were.
Fair.
And I think that's what I'm doing here.
And that's sort of what I was saying in terms of like, a writer's going to come and say, here are the rules of Limbo. And they are going to make some sense, and they're going to reflect things that we know. And then there's going to be ways in which they can't possibly allow for something that happened. And we are going to have to just say, whatever, like, here we are. And then somebody's going to take something that can't possibly have happened and build a whole story on it.
Yeah.
And we're still going to have to say, like, it's just cool that Pixie's in the event. So even though this can't have happened, with the rules of Limbo, this can't have happened.
True.
It's cool that she's here. So we're just going to have to go with it.
You go,
Pixie. We have to remember, too, there is a non-mutant Ilyana that's fully Darkchild somewhere running around Limbo after Rosencandy. Like,
and that's a great example of something that I think like might never come up again.
Yeah.
And that the rules might not, like the official rules that we get at some point in the future might not allow for. And that
wait. Do we have any? Do we know where demons come from?
When a
Like
man in
like
a-
the Limbo demons?
no,
okay, but they all didn't they all disappear when the weird worm and Excalibur, like in Doctor Doom, were like, oh, the Prometheum, oh,
Yeah, but I mean, you know,
Yeah.
they'll
So-
just come back. But if we don't know where these demons come from, what if that Ileana just became a demon? What if Belasco's plan for Ileana was just one of a million plans, and the demons are all just soulless creatures that have morphed over the extended time that's dilated by Limbo? It's seconds for us, but it's millions of years for them sometimes. So what if Ileana, when we eventually see that non-human demon Darkchild, what if she is the evolutionary result a la Sim or Nastir?
Ooh. And like, when are we gonna ever meet that meet? When are we ever gonna meet the Elder Gods? Like
that
we've
might be
heard
a
about
case
the whole
of
time.
we should not ever meet them because it's going to be really difficult to write something as good as. But like, you know, I also go back to the work that we did on Limbo a few months ago, and the really stylized referential ideas that were put forth there. You know, something I'm thinking about is like the more recent appearances of Nightmare, plus the stuff that we're doing here with Limbo being a part of the world. It leads me to believe that like we could be moving towards not answers for where demons come from, but just the next phase, you know, another series that we get that sort of covers why Limbo is important, how it relates to Nightmare, what this. Yes, Jake, this is exactly what I was going with. Thank you. Explaining the birds and the bees via demons to these people is what I was put on this earth for.
I'm imagining a Sim Stork now.
I'm imagining Sim trying to explain this to Desi. But to shift focus a little bit, another thing that we got out of this that I think we are going to be dealing with, and I want to point to, and I want to sort of speculate about what it could mean based on so many things that we've covered, is Hallows Eve. One of the few really loose threads in all this is, listeners and watchers and viewers throughout this, they call her Janine, and there's a reason why they do that, and she does go by Janine, but originally when she appeared, she went by Elizabeth Tyne. And that's a very important name in the mythos of some other characters. And I'm just sort of curious, like, is that just cool? Or are we maybe looking at a fertile platform to possibly re-explore some ideas that Nico and I have been looking at over the last year in some of our MC2 coverage?
Is this more stuff that shows up in Spider-Man being verse?
Oh, I only wish. We are dying for this to show up in verse top bottom Spider-Man.
This is just an MC2.
Unfortunately. But Nathan, do you remember Dark Devil at all?
Yes.
It's revealed that Dark Devil is equal parts Ghost Rider and Daredevil, and is the child of Elizabeth Tyne, and so is actually like a person who transforms into what looks like a mask of a demon and has hell powers, basically. And this is such an amazing opportunity to create that character in Marvel now that we're seeing the success of, the borderline success. I also don't think that this is the worst Amazing Spider-Man run I've ever read. I just don't. But I can see where fans don't love it. And check out fucking how cool and hot Dark Devil is. Oh, he's so hot.
Wow. Okay.
So
Right?
to be clear, the body is the son of Ben Reilly and Elizabeth Tyne. But then there's this whole other thing, which is a little difficult to explain, wherein equal parts Matt Murdoch's dead soul and the demon soul of Zarathos are in there as well, making the dark devil portion of him. So he is part spider person, part now Hallows Eve person, with powers that he's getting from the dead soul of Matt Murdock and from a vengeance demon. And with what we're seeing with the spirits of vengeance coming up, with Hallows Eve still having a 5-issue miniseries coming up, with the background that we've had, with Matt being more important than ever, I, on the one hand, like, of course, this is just idle speculation, but I do sort of wonder about who's pointing to the importance of this character of Hallows Eve and Elizabeth Tyne and what that could mean.
First, I got to say, like, why does Dark Devil look a little bit like a hot Nightcrawler Daredevil combo?
1,000%.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
I'm
hot.
like,
hot.
what? I was like, that is really hot. Like, he just needs a tail and like uber sexy. But we're getting a Hallows Eve series, so maybe they will go into some of those connections. Like, they can't have picked her as a character to do this arc without trying to tie it in with her back history. Like, I know somewhere there's going to be some writer who's going to be like, oh my god, this is so cool, we have to explore this connection between these characters.
And I think the value in exploring things that they already own is they already fucking own it.
Right.
Like, that's something that people kind of, I think, overlook. The value of the intent of synergy is so impressive. When Marvel decides they're going to make something work, they're going to make it work whether you like it or not. And they're going to try it 1,000 ways till it works. And all you need to do is look at how many times they've relaunched Spider-Woman in the last 5 years to see that they'll just keep working at it till it works. And I don't know. I think Dark Devil is really interesting. And we have this whole, all these spirits of vengeance coming up, and X-Men is about to have like a double crossover between the spirits of vengeance and Wolverine, and with Banshee having a spirit of vengeance. And there's all of these layers where like every book's got a symbiote, every book's got a spirit of vengeance. And with Spider-Man and X-Men basically becoming roommates, it as like titles, it really feels to me like the design here is, what if every book has a symbiote? Every book has a spirit of vengeance. Every book has a spider. Every book has an X-Man. Every book has a magic person. And I do worry that is going to dilute the quality of each individual property. But I wonder if Marvel is just trying it, seeing what works, and then putting back what doesn't.
And then also, don't you think there's a little bit of like, let's normalize all of these things everywhere so that as people are getting used to the many varieties of Marvel Universe that you will see, as you get used to the idea that you might be a Spider-Man fan who watches Spider-Verse, you are comfortable with the mutant being in Spider-Verse. You are comfortable with the symbiote being in Spider-Verse. When the first X-Men movie comes out, if you're a big symbiotes fan, you will have some knowledge of who the X-Men are because of the crossover. Like, this is all to make all of us as comfortable with the core concepts that are the most monetizable as possible.
I like what Legion of X is trying to do with the spirit of vengeances, right? To make them more identifiable as separate spirits of vengeance, right? It's terrifying with the reveal in the last issue who is sort of pulling the machinations behind the spirit of variance. But if it gives me moments like Banshee riding Juggernaut, I'm all here for it. But like, I don't see it as anything more than a fun thing. And sometimes what they do, sometimes I think they pull the Jason Aaron liver a little bit too much when they do some of these things, and they've got to be careful. And I think especially with what Jason Aaron has reconceptualized the spirit of vengeance as being a long line of Earth, one of the Earth's primal defenses. Like, I think to do a crossover event to have all of these spirits of vengeance is going to be iffy. And I think doing another summer of symbiotes after King in Black was what, 2 years ago now, is iffy. But I think if they're small events like Dark Web, they'll be fun. But I think if you make them big, gigantic events like King and Black, it's gonna be too much. That makes sense.
I wonder if they've just decided that they're just doing certain things. We're just going to get a hyphen verse event every other year. And the year we don't get a hyphen verse event, we're going to get a hyphen symbiotes event. Because I agree with you, King and Black, but also we had the Carnage one before that. We had the Venom one before that. We had, we just kind of keep doing this.
Yeah.
I think that the time where they wanted it to be fun worked when fans weren't monsters, but fans just can't let shit go.
No.
And I notice on this schedule, Kevo, if you wouldn't mind just returning to that schedule really quick, it says Summer of Symbiotes. And the only reason that's unique to me is because Avengers Assemble, which ultimately is a much bigger deal than just November 22.
Oh yeah, I mean that's when it starts.
But I can't help but notice that it's called Summer of Symbiotes. It's not called Symbiote Event. It's Summer of Symbiotes. And I think this is going to be a big one. And I think that's why Cassandra Nova just wore a symbiote. And I think that's why Wolverine fought a symbiote
and Deadpool has a symbiote.
And Deadpool has a symbiote.
You get a symbiote, and you get a symbiote, and you get a symbiote.
I think they're serious about this. I think they want to see if they can put a symbiote in everything so that they can make the argument that anytime, like, because think about how expensive it's getting to have characters appear in other films.
Yeah.
Think about how costly it's getting to make a Captain America movie that has enough characters in it. But what if Captain America had a friend with a symbiote? And what if Captain America had a friend that's a spirit of vengeance? And once they're canonical, we don't seem to mind as much.
And what do you lose by putting the work in right now?
Nothing. We
can't, not every summer can be House of X and Powers of 10. Those are really Black Swan events. We can't recreate that magic all the time. And we can't have everything be as definitively that now here's the future of Marvel Comics. Some years, some summers need to just have a bunch of chaos out of which we pull a few symbiote friends and, some new spirits of vengeance. This is feeling like a very interesting summer for the possibility of some new characters, and that's everybody from like a Rec Rap to Hollow's Eve to some new symbiotes that I think we're going to end up meeting this summer, and possibly some new spirits of vengeance. I think now is the time to, rather than taking big swings at continuity and status quos, maybe play around with characters for a little bit and take some big swings at a character that people are going to find beloved for years to come.
Yeah, but it's like the symbiotes, it just seems weird because I'm like, we already had, right before House of X, we had that crossover between Venom and the all-new X-Men where we had like Jean Grey symbiote. Yeah. So I'm like...
Venomized. Everything was Venomized.
That's right. That's what it was. Thank you. I was like, we've already had like a Jean Grey symbiote and etc. But like, I don't know. But if Al Ewing's doing it, I'm sure that it's going to be better than that event.
well, and please go ahead.
I am so excited to get to those events, but we have run massively over time, so I'm wrapping this bad boy up. It has been so exciting to get into looking at Dark Web and figuring out the future of Spider-Man, X-Men, Limbo, Demons, Clones, and more. And I can't wait to see how it's going to affect the trajectory of the Marvel Universe. But until that time comes, where we look at all of these amazing stories that we just talked about coming up after taking a look at this event, I just can't wait. And until then, where can everybody find you guys online? I know you guys can find me at Nico Action. That's NicoAction. And you can find the show at xsforshow.com and X's for Show on YouTube and Twitter.
You can find me on Twitter mainly but everywhere else, like recounting all of my favorite Limbo rulers at Dazzler AOA. That's like Dazzler in the Age of Apocalypse.
And you can find me talking about how Belasco would make a really great sassy gay wizard on Twitter, Instagram, Hive, Tumblr, always as XNateXGrayX.
And until we come back to talk some more, I think next one is X-Men. I think it's going to be X-Men, and I think it's Sunday.
Talking, yeah,
it's going to be Sunday X-Men. And oh, Kevo, there you are,
in the
handsome.
mix.
Oh, put me in the lead. That's nice.
Well.
Oh, and before we go though, I have to do my quick brag because I have to brag every episode.
We got a glad nominee in the
check out
mix.
Young Men in Love. I can't not brag.
I go read it.
So
root for one Nico action.
Yeah, I'm
super
pretty
cute,
proud of
super
that.
fun.
Thank you. And pretty excited about it. And check out all the amazing programs on this network here at the amazing X's for Show network on YouTube. You can find us at X's for Show, where we got shows like Billy Club, X's for Podcast, HTML, and more.
Yeah.
All right. And until next time, keep those mutant light lit, those Krakoan gateways open. Remember, let's hope that we get some Dark Devil in this timeline. And we'll see ya.
Bye.